I'm Lindsay Brock, Director of Library Services for the County of Middlesex and CEO of Middlesex County Library. The library's mandate is to provide a vibrant community space that encourages people to gain knowledge, build relationships, be creative, and enhance their lives. So we are really in the beginning phase of formalizing our practices into policies for the library system. We've started this work and recognize that we have much more to do. We have a workplace discrimination and harassment policy, and this is a county-wide policy that extends beyond the library. As well, in 2022, Middlesex County Library Board adopted our first library-focused policy relating to racism and discrimination. This is our Indigenous respect and acknowledgement policy. And this came out of the library's recognition of our responsibility to support and participate in reconciliation work. So there's three parts to this policy: a land acknowledgement statement, a statement about our collections, and then a statement about our services and programs. And so through this policy, we're working on a number of projects. Most recently, our work on decolonizing our collections. So examining our collections and our purchasing practices through that lens of social and racial justice. And as well, we'll be bringing staff together throughout the year to help guide this work on anti-racism, as well as work related to equity and inclusion. We know that these values and this work really has to be integrated in everything we do: practices, policies, programs, and services. And we want this process to be about turning outward to our communities to learn more about them, because they are the reason why we exist.
Hello, my name is Christian DeBood. I'm the manager for the Health Equity and Indigenous Reconciliation team at the Middlesex-London Health Unit. The Middlesex-London Health Unit promotes health in our community. Unlike hospital-based healthcare, our focus is in upstream health, in promoting conditions within our community that promote health. For example, making sure that we're promoting vaccination for things like COVID-19, that we do inspections of restaurants to make sure that the food that we eat is safe to eat. And we also do a lot of work around health equity. Health equity, we know that there's a lot of conditions like housing, income, education that have a bigger impact on our health than having access to the emergency room. The long term, that's the end of the road, but we want to promote all the conditions that make us healthy. And so health equity is one of those things. Racism, for example, is a factor that gets in the way of good health. So my team works in the organization to ensure both internally we are doing the right things to create equity internally by hiring members of our community that are representative of the diversity of London and Middlesex, but that we also work with partners like the City of London to address things like Islamophobia. And a key tool to move that forward is policy and procedure. We know that sometimes we have internal biases that unless we create process that guides our behaviors, those behaviors may not change. So for example, we have done work internally to create policies that improve the welcoming nature or the inclusivity of our organization, but we're also working with partners outside of the organization, like Indigenous communities and Black community members, to engage them, learn from them about what's priorities to them, and then modify and orient our services based on that feedback. That means that sometimes with that feedback, we change our policy and our procedure to meet their needs.
My name is John Paul McGonigal. I'm the Director of Recreation and Sport here with the City of London. The mandate of the City of London is to provide public services to our community and Londoners for recreation and sport. What that means is all of the recreation and sport programs and services, places and spaces that we offer to the community. Those are the areas that recreation and sport is responsible for. So I think as an organization, I think we've made major strides on this topic. I think the introduction of a dedicated staff team to some of our anti-racism and anti-oppression work, it's allowed us to really start to commit our kind of baseline policies, outlining our dedication and our commitment to anti-racism and anti-oppression work in our community moving forward. From a recreation and sport perspective, there's some very specific things that we're trying to focus on with some of the groups that we work with. And so I think it's important to note that we're always trying to recruit staff to reflect the communities that we serve. I think the other main focus that we've been focused on is relationship building. And so trying to better understand what the needs and wants are from the groups and how they utilize our public spaces. And so, with the support of our Anti-Racism and Anti-Oppression Division, we have been working directly with our Indigenous population, with members of our Muslim community, to have really, really important discussions on shared matters of interest as it relates to recreation and sport from my lens and perspective. And so those are really two areas that we are heavily focused on at the moment. We also work really, really hard to try and make sure that our communications, our marketing materials are in languages and formats that help people better understand what services are available to them. And, we have a Parks and Recreation master plan that we follow. It kind of guides our activities over the next 10 years. And there's 5 overarching goals in that plan, and one of those goals is related to equity and inclusion. And so that is a council-approved document that had a lot of community feedback through its development. And so we are working on those specific recommendations from the master plan that help us improve equity and inclusion in our facilities and spaces.
Hello, my name is Chandra, and I'm an Equity and Human Rights Advisor at Viamonde School Board. I started in May 2022, and actually this is the first position of its kind at the board. And I have specifically 4 pillars that contribute to my work. So I work on education. I'm also working on building a complaints process. I review policies and practices, and I support the board strategically with equity and human rights initiatives. So in terms of our mandate, Viamonde is the only French language secular school board in central southwestern Ontario. So that means we have schools spanning all the way from Niagara to Windsor. We have 41 elementary and 15 secondary, and we really strive to be a leader in education. We're dedicated to providing innovative schools on a human scale where students become citizens of the world. So we have a number of policies that contribute to addressing racism and discrimination. And just to name a few of these policies, we have the equity and inclusive education policy. We have an accessibility policy for people with disabilities. We have a voluntary self-identification for Indigenous students, and we also have a harassment and discrimination in the workplace policy. I'm not going to go into each policy, but one that I think is really worth highlighting is the equity and inclusive education policy. Viamonde School Board is really committed to implementing Ontario's equity and inclusive education strategy. And so in this policy, there's a variety of categories. One in particular is board policies and administrative guidelines. So we want to make sure that when we're creating policies, we're not causing further harm to historically marginalized groups. So we will look at these policies with an equity lens to see what can be improved, what can be changed to ensure that these policies and these practices are being implemented equitably. Another part of this policy is students' activities and organizations, which are really important. It's important for students to have a sense of belonging where they can explore issues related to human rights or topics such as racism or topics affecting the LGBTQ+ community, for example. And so this is something that we encourage schools to implement and we support. Lastly, one thing that's really important is school climate and prevention of discrimination and harassment. So in this policy, we want to ensure that mechanisms are put in place within schools, such as surveys and reporting systems to ensure people know where to go if they find that they're victims of discrimination or harassment. And we also do ongoing professional learning for members of staff on various topics, such as human rights, Indigenous perspectives, and anti-Black racism. So that just gives you a bit of an idea of some of the policies we have and some of the things that we put in place to really bring these policies to life and implement them.
My name is Kelly Palechny. I'm the General Manager of the London Transit Commission. London Transit is responsible for the delivery of public transit services here in the City of London. Our organization and its employees are made up of a reflection of the City of London We have significant diversity throughout the workforce, and obviously our riders are also a reflection of the community. We do have a policy in place, human rights and diversity policy, which is intended to protect both our employees and our customers from any form of harassment or discrimination. In order for a customer who experiences any form of discrimination or harassment to reach out and follow through with that policy, they can contact our customer service line and they will be directed accordingly. Once we've received a complaint of that nature, our internal investigations department will undertake an investigation and with follow-up to the customer once the investigation is completed. Similar process in place for employees. An employee may experience discrimination from another employee, or they may experience discrimination or harassment from a customer. So the intent with respect to the services that we provide is that there is a respectful dialogue at all times, and that, that's expected in both ways. So again, our employees also have the same access to those procedures and investigations should they feel that they've been harassed or discriminated against. All of those complaints are investigated and the outcomes shared with the parties to the investigation.
Hi, I'm Joseph Pisano. I'm the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at Fanshawe Collage. Fanshawe College is a college located in London, Ontario, with regional campuses really throughout Southern Ontario. And at this point, we have over 20,000 full-time students and a large international student population as well. At Fanshawe, we have been on a journey to think about how to embed a sense of belonging for every student, every staff member, and every faculty member. And to me, human rights is compliance, but human rights is much more than compliance. And so we have a respect in the workplace policy at Fanshawe that would include all of the prohibited grounds of discrimination that any human rights policy would. But it's much more than that. So we have been on a journey over the last few months in thinking about the systemic barriers that might exist on our campuses and coming up with a strategy to dismantle them. So we have an EDI and anti-oppression task force at Fanshawe with diverse lived experience, diverse professional experience, all of us dedicated to thinking about how to identify and dismantle systemic barriers. We also hired for the first time an anti-racism and inclusion specialist who came on board last summer. And it's really important, I think, for our students and our staff to see themselves reflected in all levels of our organization, including leadership. And so when we think about identifying and dismantling systemic racism, it's representation and it's thinking about all of the different ways in which systemic racism and systemic oppression invades all of the different things that we might do as a college and a post-secondary institution.
My name is Praveen Skinner, and I'm the Superintendent of Student Achievement with the Thames Valley District School Board. March the 21st is recognized around the world as International Day for Elimination of Racial Discrimination. On this day, we reflect on our board's ongoing commitment to fighting racism and discrimination in our schools and in our workplaces. I am pleased to be able to highlight that Thames Valley has engaged in a number of actions to address racism. To begin with, we've held and will continue to hold a number of community engagement sessions where we have listened and learned from diverse communities that we serve and followed up with specific actions to bring about change. As a board, we recognize that equity and anti-racism work needs to be rooted in cultural humility and relationships. Equity work involves moving beyond the doing to and doing for, and instead must be focused on doing with. In this way, we are pleased to continue to work alongside valued community partners to address racism. Evidence of this approach was highlighted during Thames Valley Student Voice Conference for Black students, where we were pleased to welcome community partners to join the over 250 Black students that attended this Leadership Day, which was focused on anti-racism and supports for Black students. We were also humbled to work alongside the Muslim Resource Center for Social Support and Integration, the Youth Coalition Combating Islamophobia, and other organizations in the important commemoration of the terrorist attack that killed members of our London family. I'd also like to mention that we have provided human rights training to staff to support their understanding and provide them with tools when addressing human rights concerns. In addition, we have created a number of equity, anti-racism, and human rights resources to support staff and educators in their work, including a decision-making tool for resource selection and the Thames Valley Guidelines for the non-use of racial and other slurs and epithets. And finally, we have revised our hiring practices to proactively encourage more diverse employment candidates. We recognize that as a school board, we are making steady progress in our work to address racism, and we acknowledge that there is still much work to be done. Thames Valley remains deeply committed to eliminating racism and discrimination in all its forms and looks forward to partnering with others in this important work.